There's the pass to Leitner. Puts it up. Yes!
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Camera Chronicles. I'm your host, Max Rego. We are joined tonight by Mr. Micah Hurewitz. He was in Cameron Indoor Stadium for Duke's 2-point win over Wake Forest, a chaotic, hectic, whatever you want to call it, game. So Micah, thanks for joining.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks again, and thanks everyone for tuning in. So we'll get to the Wake Forest game in a little bit. So much to talk about. I don't know where to start. The last 48 hours for the program have been completely absurd, quite frankly. I mean, going in order, we have the Ian O'Connor book excerpts from his book that comes out next week, Coach K, The Rise and Reign of Mike Krzyzewski. Some really interesting things about Tommy Amaker, John Shire, and Coach K's relationship with Bob Knight, which a lot of things that shed some detail, a lot of details on Coach K. Then yesterday as well, the PK85 made official. It was reported back in August that Duke would be partaking in that next Thanksgiving. It's now official. Duke will be going out to Portland for Thanksgiving break. The Jimmy B Classic next December, Duke will be competing in that as well. John Shire's first entry into Madison Square Garden as a head coach. Texas also reported to be locked into that event, but Duke and Texas technically, as of right now, not officially matching up. There are two other teams that need to be added, and the matchups need to be finalized. And then the game last night. I mean, it feels crazy, but there was also a game. Trevor Keels returns to the starting lineup. Paolo Banchero, 0 points in the first half after dealing with foul trouble. Coach K, after not being himself for the first half, trainers were talking to him on the bench. He leaves mid-game. He was not on the bench during the second half of Duke's victory. It was termed not feeling well by the program. And then Krzyzewski, but he was still in the building during the game. He talked to the team after. John Shire said he was doing better. Shire told the media, Micah, you were there after the game, said he was doing better. Didn't really want to comment further. And then the end of the game itself. Shire coaches the second half. Duke blows a 19-point lead. Wake Forest gets back into the game. Then Duke apparently seemingly closes it out, gets it to a 9-point game, blows that lead. Mark Williams picks up a technical. Then he has a game-winning tip dunk with 0.4 seconds to go, and then Damari Mansato. It wouldn't have counted, right? It wouldn't have counted based on what I saw with the picture of the ball in his hand and the backboard being lit up red. But he basically almost made an 85-footer. To be, if it had counted, it would have beat number 9 Duke in Cameron on one of the craziest game winners you'll ever see. And all that being said, Duke ends up winning the game. Somehow, some way, 19-point lead, 9-point lead, they blew both of them, ended up winning on a game-winning tip dunk that Mark Williams got to cap off one of his better games of the season, 16 points, 10 rebounds. So Micah, tell me what I want to know about last night's game, because I don't know what to think.
Man, it was interesting in that building. I'm not gonna lie. I think a lot of people this year have kind of picked up on this weird trend. I mean, there's a bit of this team not really looking like itself at home. The Miami game, the Clemson game, Virginia. Now this one, probably could be playing a little better. Not gonna chalk it up to just a home court disadvantage per se. I don't know if that really exists at Cameron, but this team really has some great personalities that can get the team going, give them some momentum. It was never really theirs last night. They obviously got to the 19-point lead. The team was clicking, but I think at halftime, they were up by a little bit, but something definitely seemed off. I think part of that was Paulo not having scored. It was a weird game to say the least. I mean, I think something I noticed, especially down the stretch, in that second half without Coach K, Duke's best lineups this year in terms of offensive efficiency I've seen all include Jeremy Roche. And he wasn't having a bad game by any means, and he didn't play for the last, almost 8 minutes of that game. He left when it was 63-59, didn't see the court for the rest of it. And, 18 minutes in a game like that for a guy that averages over 30, that's not great. He, last 3 games, 0, 1 assist. This team's at its best when he's at like 6, 7, 8, 9 assists per game and really facilitating the offense. And without him out there, it was really looking different for this team. Some people, Duke haters, especially ones down the road, will say, maybe Shire doesn't have it. It's, him coaching in the second half. He, the team was clicking, but they blew the lead because of, how he was doing, yada, yada. But, tough circumstances for the team without Coach K. I still think, this team's go-to lineup includes, 5 guys that will probably all be in NBA rosters in the next year or two. They got the win, obviously, but, they really could be playing a little better.
Yeah, I mean, I want to try and evaluate, the game. It's 2 different games. I mean, I know, Shire still takes a lot of cues from Coach K, I mean, in just how the program is run at this stage, but, I mean, the second half, you have to look at how it was managed, and I like the play call they had. I like on the last possession. I like how they got Paolo downhill.
Oh, yeah.
Shire said that's a good thing. That's always a good thing for them. That's always going to result in good things. But the way that they managed the clock in the last 2 minutes, horrific.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's no other way to put it. You have Trevor Keels waving off a timeout. Well, the possession before that even, Keels saves it. They get an offensive possession about 2.5 minutes left in the game. AJ Griffin pulls up for a 3 on the left wing when Duke is up by 7 with, still a lot of time on the shot clock. You got to hold that, bring that out and hold. He didn't really have numbers either. Then on the next possession, with about a minute left, Keels crosses over when it looks like Shire was going to call a timeout. I was at the game as well. I had a tougher vantage point, but it looked like Shire was going to call timeout, and Keels got cut off, and he tried to drive and lob it to Williams. Turnover, Dallas Walton, dunk on the other end, boom, 2-point game, under a minute left. Wake Forest is right there.
It was a crowd silencer. That play was, everybody in that building was stunned that, not just that Duke's offense had come to a complete standstill. I mean, in Duke's, close games and their losses, it's all come down to, last 3, 4, 5 minutes, just offense can't get anything going. That was the same thing last night. And seeing him come down the floor and make it a 2-point game, it was stunning for everyone there.
Yeah, I mean, I was in the back row of the student section, but it was just I didn't know what to say. I mean, you look at a team that consistently in these types of situations, they just simply, I mean, they closed it out last night. That's the first one, really. They've closed out in like that type of situation. Ohio State, Miami, Florida State. I know they won Gonzaga, but it's been a while since they've been able to close a game like that. And they closed it last night, but they really just like limped. They almost limped into the house, They just struggle to get it in. I mean, they just like try to they have to like band-aid it together and try and finish games. But I mean, I think the problem is I don't know if they have a closer. I think Paolo can be the guy. He's so gifted athletically, and he got downhill. He just didn't finish, and that's one of the things that he needs to work on. The Coach K has harped on with him based on all of his press conferences. I think he can be that guy. I like the ball screen they had. They got the switch for him. Jake LaRavia was guarding him after the screen by Griffin. They got him downhill. It's a good play call by Shire. It's a good decision. Obviously, put the ball in his hands. Good things can happen a lot of the time. And Mark Williams. I mean, he was terrific last night. He played really well. And he saved the day at the end. So it's so many things that went on. Keels coming back in the starting lineup. The rotation kind of tightening there late. Not a lot of Joey Baker or Bates Jones in the second half. Not a ton of Theo John in the second half. Not a ton of Roach, like you said, leaving with about 6-7 minutes left. So a weird game, and I think. Well, despite the win, they still have a lot of things to clean up late in games, and they need they need to utilize their personnel and manage things situationally better. They need to be able, like Trevor Keels should have taken the time out there. You do not try to get a cheap basket there. Well, it's like a 6-point game versus a 4-point game. At that scenario, at that instance, that's not as valuable as running another 30 seconds off the clock.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah. Just in that situation, because Wake can still come down and hit 2 threes. So, yeah, it was just a funky game. Like, Wake did everything right late, seemingly, and still somehow wasn't able to win. Almost, I mean, whether that shot got off or not, it didn't get off. He didn't get it off. But just like that's a fitting end to what was one of the crazier games in Cameron in recent memory, quite frankly. I mean, I was at the Stephen F. Austin game. That was crazy. But I was at the Florida State game 2 years ago. That game was, neither team played great. It was a rock fight. There have been some crazy games in Cameron during my time here. That one, I think, probably takes the cake, quite frankly.
Really. And, about that last shot, I mean, of course it looks like consensus is that, he didn't get it off. Obviously missed. They didn't have to look at it. Someone in the presser asked Shire if that was, reminding him of the Gordon Hayward shot back in 2010. He said he wasn't even thinking about it really. But yeah, I mean, Steve Forbes gave a interesting comment about that. He said, maybe the refs would have waved that off just because it was in Cameron, joking about, the Duke favor. But, again, yeah, just weird game overall. Crazy ending. One of the wildest, finishes to a basketball game you'll see.
Yeah, I mean, there's no other way to put it. Like you said, one of the wilder games we will see all season, and not just for Duke, throughout the ACC, throughout college basketball, and it ended. Of course, these games always end with a review. It always ends with a review, and I mean, so much to take away. I mean, we barely even talked about Mark Williams picking up a technical.
The emotions were high.
Yeah,
it was chippy.
It was a chippy game for a little bit there. I thought Paolo was more assertive in the second half. He wasn't dealing with the foul trouble like he was in the first, but he ended up picking up a couple cheap fouls there late in the second half, but early second half when he was able to get some clean looks. I thought he played well. He just he needs to finish better. He needs to be a little stronger with the ball. And I think they need to keep going with him. You can't turn away from him. I mean, he's so gifted, and his work, his footwork, his mid-range ability. You got to keep going back to that, and you got to keep going back to the well, and it'll pay off for you eventually. That's what the coaching staff I thinks, based on my estimation. So, where do we go from there? So we talked a little bit about Coach K's health. He's doing fine. Wendell Moore said he was getting an IV in the arena. From what I am led to understood. Shire again said he was doing better. He told the media that after the game. He said obviously he's doing better, especially due to the fact that they won. But he was still in the building, so that's obviously a positive sign. And it remains to be seen whether he will be able to coach during Saturday's game against Florida State. That's obviously 3 days away. So. There's other news that we got to get to. Some interesting stuff, I would say. We're not going to talk much about the PK85 and the Jimmy V Classic. Obviously, those are two big events, but those kind of take a back seat to. So, Ian O'Connor of the New York Post also has written for ESPN in the past. He is releasing a book, comes out next week, called Coach K: The Rise and Reign of Mike Krzyzewski. And obviously, as is typical of book tours and the lead up to these books being released, some excerpts were released early. I plan on probably getting a copy of this. I want to read this probably in like a day, just to read the whole thing. Because there's obviously a lot goes into his early family life, his early career, his relationships with a lot of players in the 80s and the 90s, his approach to recruiting. But two things stand out. And the first we got to get to is the situation of the circumstances of how Jon Scheyer got the job as head coach in waiting. So obviously Coach K, decides in April of last year, right, of April 2021, him and his wife, Mickey, decide that the next season is going to be their last season, and he's going to retire. The search process is conducted. John Jackson, Duke's deputy administrator, is heading that search process. And based on the reporting that O'Connor does, and I have it here in front of me, this is an excerpt from the book, but it's this article is actually written by Ryan Glassenspiel of the New York Post. So O'Connor, reportedly that the Duke administration, President Vincent Price had targeted Tommy Amaker to be the next head coach, right? Coach K, this is reported by O'Connor, he held a Zoom call with Amaker last year and had what a source described as a very difficult conversation with him. Krzyzewski explained to Amaker that if he left Harvard to join the Duke staff as a successor in waiting for the 2021-22 season, that, of course, is due to the fact that he needs to be able to recruit the next class, right? The move would force the demotion of a Blue Devils assistant. I'm assuming that means Nolan Smith, because he's the lowest ranking member of the staff right now, with Chris Carrawell and Jon Scheyer being on staff, and create an awkward dynamic with Scheyer. Realizing he didn't have his mentor's blessing, Amaker left the call heartbroken, according to a person close to him. And then this is according to one Duke source. Mike had to explain to Tommy why he couldn't be the guy. He can be Don Corleone when he needs to be. I have that quote specifically highlighted. So I think it's fascinating because it shows the power dynamic at play here and how this search was conducted. When Coach K announced, when it was reported, obviously Jeff Goodman of Stadium broke the news. We reported it. We tried to get it out there as fast as we could because we had no, inkling of that this was going to be reported that day. It seemed like, it hadn't been revealed that this was a whole process that had been conducted for weeks. The Athletic did a great deep dive into that. Seth Davis, Brendan Marks really looked into this. He decided in April, and when he met with his coaching staff, Chris Carrawell said the next head coach is in this, is here. It's Jon Scheyer. So that was he was the favorite apparently amongst Chris Carrawell and maybe amongst other members of the coaching staff. Who knows there? Apparently he was the favorite for Coach K, but then Duke's administration, Vincent Price, Nina King, other members of the search committee, that obviously needs to be, elaborated on in the book. They apparently wanted Tommy Amaker, who has been at Harvard for the last 14 years, correct? He was at Michigan as well before that. He played at Duke in the 80s. He was Coach K's his first great lockdown point guard. So he's one of the foundational members of the program, and he's a Duke lifer. He's one of Coach K's favorite point guards to coach. He has been at Harvard since 2007. He has made the NCAA tournament. He has had a good run at Harvard. He made the NCAA tournament 4 years in a row, from 2011 to 2015. Got to the round of 32 twice. So he's no slouch. He can clearly coach. His time in Michigan featured no NCAA tournament appearances. So that's a bit of a red flag. He was 68-55 in 4 seasons at Seton Hall. He went to Seton Hall from Duke. He was an assistant at Duke. He was the associate head coach at Duke in 1997 when he left for Seton Hall. So he's really a guy that obviously Coach K knows. He's part of the coaching tree. He's part of the family, and he doesn't get the job. And he's apparently a finalist, and he's someone that the Duke administration likes and targets for this job. And Coach K talks him out of taking the job because his preference is Scheyer because he wants to have that continuity, like he said about in the Army, where he wants to have the succession plan where Scheyer can recruit, spend the summer recruiting. Coach K doesn't want to tell these kids that he's going to coach them when he's not actually going to coach them, which I understand. It's within his right to do that. That's probably the right way to, if you're going to carry this out, it's probably the right way to do it. I just think it's interesting that there was apparently this disconnect, right? This disconnect between, what the administration wants, what, Duke University administration wanted, and what Coach K wanted. Micah, what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, really, I think, for a guy that's been at this school for 42 years, I mean, he has a lot of power in terms of, the future of this school and its athletic program, and, how Duke goes about his business. I mean, he's the most famous face of Duke University, and, ultimately, the administration, granted his wish of getting Shire as the new head coach. It's certainly an interesting situation that I did not expect to see come out when it did. Really, I had been curious about what led them to settle on Shire. I knew over the last couple of years he was moving up the ranks. He's associate head coach. He's been doing lots of recruiting. Has an impeccable class for his first year next year as head coach. So he's got a great future lined up for him. But it's definitely curious how all this went down. Looking forward to learning more from the book itself. But my first reaction, my jaw was on the floor. I was shocked to be reading what I was. The Don Corleone quote was something else, really. But in the end, Coach K is boss here, and he has been for a while, and ultimately he's going to get what he wants.
Well, setting the just the humor of the Don Corleone quote, Coach K's a very smart guy. Every move he has made for the last 42 years here at Duke is calculated. Every move has a purpose. He's always trying to act like he's always trying to be one step ahead of the opposition. When it comes to, if you look at USA basketball, it was an honor for him to be leading USA basketball. That was also a recruiting advantage. It absolutely was. There's no denying that. And him holding on to that job for so long, it definitely helped Duke in recruiting, having the association to LeBron, Kobe, Dwayne Wade, Carmelo. And look, he has a right to. USA basketball comes up in what we'll later discuss from these book excerpts, but I think every move he has done, and there's an interesting book that I read, Blue Bloods, talks about the Duke UNC rivalry, and there's a second edition that came out. That's the one I read, and the contrasts. So there's some contrast between Coach K and Roy Williams. Coach K and Dean Smith talks about him as well. Coach K, every move is calculated. He's someone who he has lived what's termed this great American life. I think O'Connor talked about that in the Q&A with Brendan Marks yesterday of The Athletic. And he lives this great American life, and he's trying to uphold the values that his parents taught him. And he's been introduced to this newfound world of wealth and fame and fortune, and he's got running this great program, wife, kids, grandkids. But everything, he's trying to preserve that, and he definitely is aware of his legacy, and he viewed Jon Scheyer as the guy who could take the torch from him and lead this program into the future. I personally thought it was the right move at the time. I think Scheyer can tap into college basketball's future. He is willing to adjust with the times. He's maybe willing to go small ball, tap into NIL. Tap into different recruiting tactics, using social media, expanding they already have a huge brand, but expanding that even further via social media. I think he was the right guy at the right time. The timing of it, maybe if Steve Wojciechowski was the associate head coach, Coach K retires 7 years ago, maybe he's the guy who gets the job. But I think at the right time, at this point in time when Coach K announced his retirement, it made sense for Scheyer, and I think Amaker is a good coach, and obviously he's part of the family. And he released a statement at the time when John was announced as the next head coach, as a head coach in waiting, congratulating him, saying he was happy that it was staying in the family. That was obviously before this underlying stuff was revealed. But I just think Coach K is so calculated in how he approaches things. He's described as his business moves over the years, trying tap in and protect what he has kind of created for his future generations. That's what the book that I read, Blue Bloods, described it as. He's a very calculated individual. He's a smart guy. This is not I don't think this. That's why I buy this. I think he wanted to have a talk with Amaker and have this, explain to him the situation, and he wanted this transition to go right. He knows that he's partially grooming Shire. One of the last quotes here is that someone close to Krzyzewski said that Mike is the ultimate orchestrator. He wakes up in the morning trying to figure out ways to stay ahead of you, similar to what I said earlier. Sometimes Coach K has to eat his young, and Tommy Amaker just got eaten. It might be a little...
That's brutal.
Might be a little harsh, but that is, it's a cutthroat business. And
exactly.
I just think it's interesting. And whether it's the right way to approach it, I have no idea.
I guess we'll find out.
Behind the scenes, it's obviously maybe a little different. I just think, the way that Coach K approached it, I think I see partially where he's coming from, because Amaker would have to leave Harvard, come to Duke, be on staff for a year. Probably doesn't want to do that. That would create an awkward dynamic with Shire. That's what was reported as well in these excerpts. So I just think it's interesting. I think it shows how calculated Coach K is, and how I still think he's going to have an influence on the program, because that was one of the things that was reported. He thought he could still have an influence on the program with Shire as opposed to Amaker. So I think that's interesting. Whether that's true or not, obviously further reporting needs to go into that. But I do think there's holds a lot of truth. So any other thoughts?
I mean, I think you really covered it all. Definitely an interesting kind of power dynamic there. I guess we'll never know what the Amaker head coach at Duke would look like. But from what I've seen from Shire, from how he handles himself on the sideline to leading the team, I think he really is a great continuation of Coach K's Duke program in the 21st century, and I think that I think he's going to do a good job. And again, we'll never know what would have happened otherwise. But here we are, and Coach K's got 2 home games left.
Yeah,
it's we're getting there.
Yeah.
It's season's wrapping up. We're getting there.
Yeah, no, I think it's crazy that there's only 2 home games left, and the three road games are Pitt, Syracuse, which those 2 games are against 2 cellar dwellers of the ACC right now, and Virginia, who's playing really well. I know they lost the other night to Virginia Tech, but they're really turning it around. Tony Bennett, I think, has done a really good job with that roster. I just think it's an interesting, the politics of this are really interesting to me. Another thing that was kind of mentioned in these excerpts is the relationship between Coach K and Bobby Knight. How that's evolved over the years, and I think the general consensus I think is that they, as mentor-mentee, they kind of had a really good relationship. That apparently has not been the case. They apparently don't really have much of a relationship now. Knight was apparently not happy with one of his former players and assistants, stealing his spotlight, passing him in wins. He was not happy with Coach K keeping the Olympic job, the USA basketball job, for 3 straight Olympics. He was reportedly furious about that. Actually, it's just clear that it's not what it seems. It's these, you get 2 people who are very driven, very at their coach, during middle age, can be very confrontational. Very committed to their professions, very a very bare knuckles approach, very very dynamic approach. You have 2 people like that who are and have a working and personal relationship. They're going to butt heads, and I think it boiled over in this event in 2015 at Pinehurst when Knight was being honored, where he just kind of brushed Coach K off, Coach K came up and said, "Hey, how you doing, Coach?" And he just kind of didn't say anything. So that's apparently
Wow.
they don't have much of a relationship now. I just think it's interesting, and I don't know. I don't know what to think. I think I was always led to believe that they had some issues when they were coaching against each other, but they had done some ESPN interviews back in the late 2000s, where it seemed like they were still friendly with each other. It's just interesting that this would come out, and he was his former player. And still, this relationship is weird. When he passed him for all-time wins, Knight apparently told K, not bad for a kid who couldn't shoot, and Coach K did not, he didn't say it to him. He didn't respond at the time to him. He's like, oh, thanks, thanks, Coach, whatever. But he apparently reportedly by O'Connor, he told members of the Duke traveling party, on the way back, because that game was at MSG, they beat Michigan State. He's like, why does he keep saying that to me? Why is he just coming after? Why is he making fun of me like that? So it's just weird. Yeah. Any thoughts?
Man, that's wild. And I think, from a Duke standpoint, really, it's Bob Knight's just this total father figure for a man who's now 75 years old. He's treated like a king sometimes on this campus, and the fact that the guy that kind of helped get him there, the fact that there's no sense of pride there, whatever happened between the two, what they were saying to each other, on the sidelines or off the court, man, it's fascinating how these things go. And obviously Bob Knight, a legendary coach who raised Coach Krzyzewski into coaching in basketball, but just to hear these stories, it's fascinating. These dynamics between these people. I just can't believe all these things are happening and coming out at the same time. It's a lot. It's really a lot.
I mean, one paragraph that I'm reading here. This is from this excerpt of the book that was released. O'Connor released it on Yahoo Sports. When before the 2008 Olympics, Knight obviously coached the Olympic team in 1984. Knight apparently told Krzyzewski, "Just remember, Mike, you are as good as they are." And it says here Krzyzewski had been genuinely touched when he said that. But then Knight told him, Knight made an offer to scout for the Olympic team. Apparently Krzyzewski didn't even return the call. There was an incident in Puerto Rico at the Pan Am Games with a police officer. So I think it was reported that maybe Krzyzewski was worried about an incident like that happening. But he never heard back from Krzyzewski when Knight made that offer, and he was clearly offended. So just shows that it's a much more complicated relationship than we've been led to believe. So any last thoughts on some of these excerpts from the book, because it's obviously comes out next week, and it's not something to be ignored.
Oh, I think anyone who cares at all about Duke basketball, who's been watching Coach K for a while, it's worth a read. I'm looking forward to hearing more about it, reading it myself. It's really almost overwhelming, and for all this to happen when this team is wrapping up a crazy season. They're still a top 10 team, and there's all this attention on Coach K's last games, how he's going to finish his career at Duke, and all this crazy stuff about his relationships with his peers, mentors, mentees. It's a lot to take in at the same time. So that's my takeaway from that.
Yeah, no, and it's just interesting to see when the whole product comes out. We're getting ready to wrap it. We don't have too much else to talk about, as crazy as that is. But a couple things to note, I think, before we get our ramp up our coverage for Duke's home battle against Florida State Saturday. A couple stats I thought were interesting. Duke is now 10th in KenPom. Adjusted offensive efficiency of 12th. Adjusted defensive efficiency of 19th. They are projected, according to KenPom, 26-5, 16-4 in the ACC.
Who's that loss going to be to?
It says here they projected to win all 5, but it obviously plays out the simulations over multiple times. And one of those, and the closest game here is Virginia next Wednesday, February 23rd. Which
I'll be there.
You'll be there. That's right, with Jonathan Leviton. So I think those are interesting. I think Duke is on the precipice of getting back into contender status. Florida Saturday's I think a very important game. Florida State has really struggled recently. They are now off the bubble. They were on the bubble as of late, but I think that's another game where I think Paolo Banchero needs to really assert himself. I think if you look at how they matched up in the last game against Florida State, he really took over. I think a lot of 4 or 5 ball screens with him and Mark Williams get him going downhill. Because he's still averaging 16.9 points a game, 8.5 boards, 2.8 assists. He's shooting 31% from 3, which for a guy at his size, that's still impressive.
Yeah.
You need to put the ball in his hands. So
yeah, I mean, after yesterday's game, he finished with I guess it was a baker's dozen points on the scoreboard, but 0 in the first half, 2 for 10 shooting. He got a bunch of points from the free throw stripe. Just the way he's playing. He's finding ways to contribute to the offense, but he told me after the game, his offense has been bad. I mean, he acknowledges that, and this team isn't gonna make a run without him. So if he can figure that out, start getting back up to 20, 25 point games over down the stretch into the ACC tournament, this team can go places. But as of now, there's still a bit to figure out. It's up to the next week, 2 weeks to see what they got.
Yeah, I think Wendell Moore will be a big part of that because he was a stabilizing force last night. I thought he played terrifically, getting to his spots, staying patient, really operating within the offense. I thought there were a couple times where Keels, Griffin tried to do a little too much iso ball. I think Moore picked his spots very well, and that comes with experience. But I think him and Banchero, they really need to be the guys that Duke relies on. And Williams inside, he's really stepping up. I mean, Mark has played really well. Since NC State, when he had that breakout game with 8 blocks, 19 points, 10 rebounds, I believe, 11 rebounds, yeah, and 8 blocks. Since then, he has been an all-conference level setter.
Absolutely.
Consistently. So those 3 guys, I think, are going to need to be Duke's. That's their big 3. In my opinion.
I fully agree.
In my opinion. So yeah, that's a wrap. We covered a lot of bases, but we will be live from Cameron on Saturday, 6 p.m. against Florida State. We'll have our Glenn Morgenstern and Nathan Ragunathan live from Cameron for another rematch. Obviously, Clemson was their first rematch game. Wake was their second, and now Florida State's their third. So then they got Virginia, Syracuse, and North Carolina also all left as second games against those respective teams. So for Micah and I, thanks everyone for listening. It's quite a hectic pod, but Micah, thanks for joining, man.
Thanks again, man.
All right, yeah. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Have a great rest of your weeks.